So if you're watching this video, it means that I've sold this camera. It's the OG Red Komodo. Now, I'm not making this video to complain about the camera or say that it doesn't work for me anymore. Much to the contrary, it's actually my favorite camera that I've ever owned and worked with. And really the only reason that I've sold it is to help fund the Z-mount Red Komodo X. And I can talk about that purchase later on in this video. But really, I wanted to make this video because partly I think it's helpful to hear people process larger gear decisions, but also just for me as a reminder to kind of have something to look back onto and remember how far I've come and what this camera meant to me at the time that I was able to buy it. I was looking back on one of the first videos that I uploaded about this camera and was reminded of kind of where things were when I purchased the camera. I had worked with Red a decent amount in the past, but had never owned one, and it had been quite a few years since I had worked with one on a regular basis. So having a Red camera was definitely a dream of mine, and I had a couple of projects presented to me in the spring of 2023 where renting one of these guys made a lot of sense for the project. And I sort of had a light bulb moment where I realized that I could either rent the camera for that project and, be totally fine and get to use the camera, or I could figure out a way to buy this camera and then take that same rental fee that the rental house would have charged, but have that charged back to me to be able to pay the camera off, and then hopefully take that same business model onto other projects and have the camera pay for itself. Now, I made a somewhat risky decision of doing this when I didn't have enough cash to pay for the entire thing. And so I ended up putting a good amount of the camera's, balance on the B&H 12-month interest-free financing. Now, I knew that I had enough cash from savings and from those projects to make about 4 or 5 months worth of the payment. So a little less than half of the purchase value. And it sort of bought me, essentially 4 months to figure out how to replicate this business model with other clients, or have that client be a repeat client, and eventually have the camera being rented back to myself on projects. And it was a huge risk. It was definitely not something that I would advise unless you also have a pretty good indication that you're going to be able to have revenue coming in to kind of offset that, obviously, so that you don't go into debt. And at the time I knew it was a risk, but I also knew I either had 4 months to come up with the rest of the cash to pay for the camera, or 4 months to realize this isn't going to work and I need to sell the camera and, cut my losses. And at that point, I probably am not losing money because I had a chunk of the camera paid for already. So fast forward to 2 years later, I still own this camera and it's paid for itself and then some. It's made me some money in a semi-passive income sort of way, just being able to rent it back to myself on projects and essentially just charge a larger kit fee. But because the camera is paid off, now that's profit that I'm making on the project when I would have been renting out to, a different rental house. And I'm now getting that profit as opposed to a local rental house or an online rental shop. If you had asked me 2.5 years ago if I would be in that position of owning the Red Komodo and having it pay for yourself, I would have told you that I thought you were crazy. And if you would have told me that 2.5 years later I would be selling this guy because I would be buying a Komodo X that can actually use Sony lenses on it, I would have thought that you were absolutely crazy. I would not have believed you. But getting this camera was definitely a turning point in my career. And I don't want to, sit here and act like this thing was the silver bullet. You should definitely go out and spend more money on gear. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But what I am trying to say is that making a decision that was hard to back away from and having to commit to, and taking that step was a huge step forward in my business and in my progress as a filmmaker, because I took a risk that I had a hard time going back on. And because of that, I committed to finding more clients and expanding my business into kind of the rental and owner operator space, and was able to have the camera pay for itself to where I wasn't having to pay out of pocket to own this guy and to fund it, and I was having clients fund the camera for me. And 2 years later, I've shot some of my favorite projects and have really been able to check a lot of boxes in terms of being able to use it on the types of shoots that I wanted to do. I think the only type of project that I didn't get to use this camera on was an overseas documentary project, but I've had a lot of really other good, exciting things happen in lieu of that, and I'm totally okay with that. I think my biggest takeaway from, kind of reflecting on owning this thing for the past couple years is that, one, I've come a long ways and that's really exciting. But two, I think as I've thought back over the past couple years, yes, there have been a lot of wins, but there have also been a lot of challenges and low points. And there have been quite a few times where I still had, despite owning, what was and is my, dream camera, still had that slump of, gear acquisition, false hope of, if I buy that next lens, if I, have that next upgrade to my Komodo, will that help me kind of get out of this slump, find that silver bullet, and be able to elevate my career? And really, I think the career elevation is not the single gear purchase. It is making one commitment and sticking to it and following through with it, and kind of having multiple things like that compound over time. So yes, it was making a financial investment into my business that was hard to turn back on, and I had to commit and follow through in finding the clients and the rentals to be able to pay for the camera. But it was also sending that message to friends to produce passion projects. And it was getting in the car and driving to, the cool location to do the shoot that I had been wanting to do for a year. And it was making those commitments and those little steps along the way that really, I think, made the last 2 years what it was. Because if it's just this camera, I'm still going to have gear acquisition syndrome. That's just probably the way I'm wired, for better or for worse. But it's using the tool to make the story and produce the thing that is going to bring me the joy and satisfaction. And so upgrading to the Komodo X and the Z mount really is less about it's a cool camera and it has more frame rates and better audio and, a few upgrades. It's less about that, and it's more about the fact that because it has Sony lenses, I can kind of simplify my kit and my workflow, and I can sell the OG Komodo, I can sell some of my EF glass and put that money towards the new camera. And so the new camera purchase is really a fraction of the investment that this guy is, and is going to be a lot easier for me to pay back. And now I have a better camera because I was able to sell those things and continue to make those little steps of progress along the way. I'm excited for whoever is going to buy this camera because it has taken really good care of me and has been an absolutely fantastic camera. And I'm sure whatever stories you are going to produce with it are going to be awesome. All right, I'll catch you guys in the next one.